interesting history himself. We'll learn a little bit about that.
Slideshow is over.
Thank you for coming. Good night. So Joel has a 29-year career in foreign service before retiring. He spent part of that time in Liberia. And I'm not going to go into a lot because we did publicize this in advance with a nice biographical stuff. If you don't want to listen to me, you want to listen to Joel. I've enjoyed numerous conversations over the months on this project. We keep finding additional information. So at some point, we'll probably be doing this program again in an expanded format because we're learning just in the last 24 hours. We've learned stuff we didn't know. And it's amazing going into this project. I think both of us were thinking Joseph Jenkins Roberts, that's the focus, and it is the focus, but what we found is that there are a lot more people from Petersburg who went to Liberia and were in positions of power and who made major contributions to that country. And I even think the First Lady is one of the most interesting characters of all, someone who was born and raised a couple blocks away from where we are today. So, we're going to move along rapidly, and we'll have opportunity later for questions. And there's some refreshments in the beer too. So, I don't want to have to wrap up that stuff later. So,
Thank you, sir. And Justin, may I also ask you to introduce yourself very quickly since you are down at the
Sure, yes. Justin Sterry. I'm Executive Director of the Stuart Petersburg Foundation, working in New Hampshire. And we welcome Joel and also our visitors.
Okay. I hope all of you have signed up. That's for them, so that they can keep you apprised of the good work that they're doing. Those of you who are residents or members, I guess, right, support historic preservation in all its forms. I'm a big believer of that. And it's a crime shame when communities don't preserve their past or recall their past. We lose it sometimes forever. Let's see, a couple of house rules, I guess. Anything that past we're always going to be called, right? Even in retirement, I mean, you need to be calling. And there, the Liberian embassy is welcoming you warmly on these two occasions and hopefully more in the future. Because I'd actually come to your embassy to give this presentation, actually. You can let the ambassador know who was not able to make it, by the way, but I'm ready to come and talk for another hour. But would you mind standing up? And these three are resources for you. So if you have questions, I'm not going to ask Joel, I'm going to ask Minister Counselor Jeff Charles, sorry. And introduce yourself, each of you. Tell them what you do in a quick second, so that they know if they want to ask each of you about your portfolio or something specific about Liberia, it's actually more appropriate for you than me. You're here. You're our resources. Go ahead. Thank you, Joel.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Charles Allen from the Embassy of Liberia. I'm the Minister Counselor for Political and Diaspora Affairs. It's exciting and historic for us to assemble here with our first president, King Elato. It was from this place that he went back to Liberia, changed things, and helped our people with leadership to have a statehood. So this place is historic. His Excellency has been here, but due to other engagement, as you very well know today, the president is delivering the State of the Union address. He's at that gathering, so he cannot make it, but he has asked few of us to come to join you people, because this place gave rise to the birth of our nation. Joseph Jenkins Roberts. There's a lot of him, and we are excited about. And John, we would like to encourage many of you to seize the opportunity like Joseph Jenkins Roberts. The earth of a nation, Liberia is a home open and free for everyone. You could go there, invest, you could be a teacher, you could share knowledge. Joseph Jenkins Roberts didn't know where he was going when he changed things. you now know where you are going, Liberia, they are free, with very significant historic ties with America. You could go there and help to change lives, help to impact people, help to move people, and help to touch humanity from where you are. So we are glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joetta Ali, First Secretary at the Embassy of Liberia. I'm responsible for commerce, trade, and investment. So today I'm here. I can answer all your questions if you want to do business in Liberia. If you want to know how you can get to Liberia, I can answer some of your visa questions. And whatever questions I have the answers to, I'll be willing to answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Yaba Thompson, I'm Minister Counselor for International Cooperation. So if you have any organizations here that want to collaborate with Liberia, I'm the best person to be in touch with. And Joseph Baker was too much to say and did too much. He initiated our independence, and today we are independent for over 100 years. So we are glad to be here.
Yes.
Here we go. Hang on to your seats. A lot of history, a lot of details, a lot of big stuff. That's gonna sometimes gets dizzying. Including Liberia in West Africa, where I was the U.S. Embassy Deputy Chief of Mission, which is the number 2, sort of like the COO of a company. And that was my role. And I was there from 2021 to 2023. So recent. I was not familiar with Joseph Jenkins Roberts when I got to Liberia. I read a little bit about him. I did not hear of that name from my kitchen Sunday. It was not taught in American schools. It was taught where I went to our French schools, so I grew up in France. It was not a name that was familiar to me. Nor was I familiar with the well-founded historical ties between the United States and Liberia, and most specifically, Southern Virginia, Petersburg, Norfolk, and Liberia. Those are not things I knew about. I hope most of you had a more enriching background at that point in your life when you were going to school. All that changed when I set foot in Liberia in 2023, and immediately began planning the bicentennial celebration in Liberia, the bicentennial of the arrival of the first free Black Americans on the land that came to be known as Liberia. Before the settlement, it wasn't called Liberia. Right? In fact, they settled on an island which was called Dozo. Did I pronounce that correctly? Yes. They changed that. So Dozo is in a river, surrounded by a river. Monrovia, today's capital, was called Christopolis. I'll get to the history in a second. And then it was changed to Monrovia. But I didn't know any of that. So I'm working on a ceremony on the bicentennial with the government of Liberia and the historic churches and all of this. Some, by the way, would call it a settlement, some would call it a colony. It really was a private colony. It was funded not by the U.S. government. A lot of people don't know that. It was funded by the American Colonization Society with contributions from Congress, right? Landowners, slave owners, enslavers, people who, and we'll get to that in a second, who had different motivations for supporting the American Colonization Society. As I said, Monrovia became the capital. Monrovia was named after Jenkins Roberts. This is a good class. Jenkins Roberts. And he did support colonization. Okay. And like I said, Christopolis was the first name of Monrovia, and it's the city of Christ. So you're already probably sensing this must have been a fairly religious group of people living here. Okay. What are you looking at here? And I'm going to keep looking at the slide here and trying to relate what we talked to what you're looking at there. That's in Monrovia, on top of Two-Court Hill in downtown Monrovia. It's actually part of Mamba Point, which is sort of the westernmost land in Monrovia. And in Liberia, Monrovia, people refer to it as Mamba Point outside of Monrovia, right? It's a phrase like that. It's actually Monrovia, but it's like a district or a neighborhood of Monrovia. I'm looking at the Liberian colony. If we were in Monrovia, I've seen that in the newspaper. Mamba Point outside of Monrovia or something, some phrase like that, and sort of places it. So this is the statue that people see, the tourists see. Okay? And this is part of our job tonight, is to get all of you to go to Liberia for the next 5 years of your life and see this beautiful country. Are we ready to roll? Okay, so why remember Joseph Jenkins Roberts today? Today, 24th of February, is the 150th anniversary of his death. So that in itself, I mean, how lucky were we, right, to hold this on that occasion. Second, Black History Month. What do we do during Black History Month? We recognize important Black personalities, events, history of the African American community. And there is a lot of it, and a lot of it right here. And that's the third reason we're here, is the connection between Joseph Jenkins Roberts, welcome, and Petersburg. He was not born here. He spent about 10 years of his life or more, to 14 years of his life in Petersburg. So probably influenced more by Petersburg than by Norfolk, frankly. And as we will see, his journey, starting in Petersburg, starting in Norfolk and then Petersburg and into Liberia, along with many other Petersburg residents, shaped what Liberia was to become. Okay, so the various influences he had shaped what eventually became, or who eventually became the president of Liberia. Okay, so that he became a transatlantic figure, shaped right here in Petersburg. Now, some audience had to say, isn't that cool? And you would all say, yeah. And I would agree. He's been referred to as the George Washington of Liberia, and you can see why. He was the first president. And he's also been referred to as the first African American to serve as a president of the country long before a certain Barack Obama. Think about it. A lot of interesting twists. The marker you see, those of you who live in Petersburg have seen this, just right near the monument, the stone monument at the corner of West 5th Street, near the intersection of Sycamore Street, and it was installed there by the Virginia Department of Historic Resources in 2014. Have you all seen this? Before I go any further, by the way, I do want to acknowledge a few other people. We already know Sergey and Justin, but Becky Barnhart, head of genealogy and family research services at the Matthews County Memorial Library. Do you know where Matthews County is?
Yes.
An important person was born there, which you're about to find out, which I did not know before. That's cool. But there's and guess who wants me to come and speak to them? Because of the person who was born there, trying to find out. Anyway, she was really generous in sharing information with me. Troy Velos, V-A-L-O-S, Special Collections Librarian at the Norfolk Public Library, was someone who delivered a lot of information and is still searching for things, because there's a lot of loose threads, and I'm wrong. Okay, now we know why we're here. Here's the monument, the stone monument. I hope those of you were driving past that. Now this is a huge importance, right? Our Liberian friends, have you seen this when you came to town? No. Oh, you can't leave town without seeing this. Should we let you go and take a picture and come back? It's actually 3 blocks away. Yeah. Make sure you can, if you can after the lecture. I'm not sure if there's a street light, you can see it tonight, but you should see this. This is what made me think when I first saw it. There's a monument in the United States, and this is it. Okay, here's the hard history. Are you ready for this? Joseph Jenkins Roberts was not on the first ship. That brought free blacks to the shores of West Africa, nor was he the first black Virginian to emigrate to West Africa. That might be a misconception. Oh, he was the first. He was the top. He wasn't. In 1811, Paul Cuffey and 9 other black seamen sailed Cuffey's flagship, the Traveler, the ship was named the Traveler, from Massachusetts to Sierra Leone to explore the potential for African American migration to the west coast of Africa. Cuffey returned to Sierra Leone in 1815, so it made a second trip, with 38 colonists. In 1820, right, 5 years later, the Elizabeth, a ship named Elizabeth, sailed to Sierra Leone with 86 passengers. So I added the numbers, including 9 Virginians Nathaniel Brander from Petersburg among them. Nathaniel Brander, 1820, so long before Joseph Jenkins' brother. In January of 1821, the Nautilus boat left Norfolk for Sierra Leone carrying 33 passengers, of which 26 were from Virginia. Okay. Among them were Lot Carrier and Colin Teague, founders of the Richmond African Baptist. Anybody from Richmond here today? Good. I gotta give this lecture on Richmond too. But they were founders of the Richmond African Baptist Missionary Society, and they formed a church within a church, sort of a black church group that began focusing on Liberia migration. Agents of the American Colonization Society at that time, who made the journey to West Africa, had not completed their negotiations for the purchase, for the sale for the site. They thought Liberia, that they were all going to Sierra Leone. The agents were still busy negotiating for a site in what came to be known as Liberia. So the party, all these people I was just mentioning, stayed in Sierra Leone. Many died of tropical diseases while they waited for a settlement to be purchased, land to be purchased in what became Liberia. The site they eventually purchased on December 15th, 1821, I've read was only about 140 acres. I've seen miles, square miles, but there's some more recent research that suggests that really 140 acres was the initial purchase. The selling price was about $300. Worth of what? Weapons, rum, and other merchandise. Lot Carrier and Colin Teague finally took possession of their new home. So they left Sierra Leone in January 1822. And that is the date I'm referring to of the bicentennial. It's the arrival of the first Black Americans, the free Black Americans, in what is today Liberia. So Roberts was not the first of the Black American immigrants. He was arguably the most successful Black immigrant to Liberia. Agree? Right. How many people went on to be president? Well, I'll tell you about that. What are you looking at? So there's the monument at the intersection of West Ridge and South St. And it says on the back of this is a description that says Roberts worked as a barber apprentice on South Union Street, about 100 yards northwest of this spot. He worked in Williams Colson's barber shop as an apprentice. Okay? And this memorial was authorized by the City Council of Petersburg on June 7th, 1977. And your ambassador at the time was here. All right. Joseph Jenkins Roberts. Let me just show you something real quick. For those who maybe want to. Virginia to Liberia. Here's Norfolk. This is the departure point. That's Monrovia. Okay, so France? No. Did they go here and go down? As far as we know, they probably came, some ships came down here and would stop in present day Haiti. I'm not aware that they went straight across like this, but more to come on the details of that kind of line across. But I just wanted to show you where Liberia was, sort of on that lower part of the West Africa. Okay, for those of you who are learning about the geography. So Joseph Jenkins Roberts, as you mentioned, his birthday was on March 15th, 1809. He was born in Norfolk. James Madison had just been elected president. James Madison. We don't know much about Roberts' early life in Norfolk, such as which neighborhood he and his family lived in. We just don't have that information yet. Maybe it exists out there. Norfolk. A little bit about Norfolk. Anyone from Norfolk here? Yeah. You need to go get this talk in Norfolk. Norfolk functioned as a kind of a gateway between inland Virginia, where we are, and the wider Atlantic world. The port city was situated on the Elizabeth River, if you know your geography, the Elizabeth River, close to the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. The city's free Black residents worked as skilled laborers, mariners, or small business owners for the most part, the free Black residents. A large number of enslaved African Americans formed a substantial portion of the town's labor force. So you can see these two populations. Norfolk exported what? Top of the list, tobacco. going.
Anything for
Maritime, tar, pitch, turpentine, exactly, and used to seal the seams, right, against water intrusion in the ship, prevent rot, keep ropes pliable, right? These were the products that were coming out. Ships arrived regularly from northern U.S. ports, New York, Philadelphia, right? The Caribbean, and occasionally Europe. The nearby Gosport Navy Yard, established in 1767, added military and industrial importance to Norfolk, employing shipwrights and laborers and tying Norfolk closely with federal naval interests. Okay, so you can see the importance of Norfolk. Picture a town of narrow, muddy streets, from what I've read. Wooden houses, warehouses, taverns, churches, small shops and wharves crowded with barrels, crates, and rigging. That's Norfolk at that time. Norfolk was more cosmopolitan than many inland Virginia towns. Sailors from different countries, free black seamen who traveled a lot. Merchants and immigrants gave the town a diverse atmosphere. Methodists, Baptists, Anglicans, Episcopal congregations were part of the religious life. Norfolk would have felt the effects of tensions with Britain leading toward the War of 1812. Right? Free black residents lived under strict legal constraints, make no mistake. They were required to carry proof of freedom, faced curfews, and could be re-enslaved if unable to document their status. Despite this, African Americans formed families, networks of mutual aid, and religious communities that offered stability and support. Right? Through these contacts that they had with each other, news circulated about abolitionist movements. Did you hear that? Free black communities elsewhere. And the Haitian Revolution, which took place between 1791 and 1804. Right? These developments deeply alarmed white authorities in Norfolk and elsewhere, who worried that black seamen might spread revolutionary ideas. And this led to tighter controls on black movement and assembly. We are in the early 19th century. Let's take a further step back in time, all right? So back to the 18th century. Joseph's mother, and a lot of librarians don't know about Joseph's mother. Her name was Amelia. She was born into enslavement in Matthews County. That's the connection. The mother of the first president librarian was born into enslavement in Matthews County. How many miles from here, sir?
Knowledge was, it's about an hour and a half drive.
An hour and a half drive today.
Yeah.
Might be a couple of days in those days, but on my horse. This was we think she was born in about 1784. Amelia or Millie was her name. In her essay about the Roberts family, historian Mary Tyler Law, some of you may have read, explains that, quote, Matthews County was part of the 1600s tidewater settlement time, when the system of English plantations and the forced labor of Africans was still evolving. Amelia's ancestors faced the Atlantic Ocean. That was her environment. Rivers, bays, boating, transatlantic commerce, and foreign sailors were part of this world, as was the uneven, this is all in quotes, but inexorable growth of the institution of black bondage in 1600 Virginia. What is this document? This is the deed of manumission. Manumission, this is the emancipation of Amelia. And you know where you can find this document? Online. And where is the original? University Archives? University of Virginia? Yes. Amelia, according to this, was emancipated in 1802 at the age of 18. And you see all this here. If you could read this, I would point out the details. I actually have read the whole thing, but look here. My servant girl, Millie, was of the age of 18 years and 8 months, now in the service of Mrs. E. McLaughlin of the town of Petersburg. So when she was emancipated, she was already here. The mother of Joseph Jenkins Roberts. And this I didn't know before. I don't think this is widely known. Okay? And then you see, this William Wright was the person who emancipated her. So he would have been up in Matthews County. He signed with an X. Okay? But This is at Hastings Court, so it should be at the court here. Isn't that fascinating? Quick question.
What was his name again?
William Wright.
Right.
Yeah. But hang on, unless you draw a conclusion about who he was.
I'd like to ask you a question. Is anybody under 30 able to read cursive?
So I grew up with that. French.
I'm over 30.
I will move on.
I can read that.
But this is what manumission looks like on paper. This is a man saying, "You are now free." This is big news because we did not know this before. It's not widely known. Amelia's first child was named Uriah, born in 1802. Right? Look at the dates. This registration was in 1814, and how old is he? Right? And look at the Uriah Tyner, a dark mulatto boy, 12 years old, last month. 4 feet 8, and I mean the descriptions are just incredible. Where they have people have scars and other facial features or body features. I have to say the identity of Uriah's father remains unknown. We don't know. I have not found a reliable source that his dad was. Sources I've consulted provide conflicting information about Uriah's date of birth, age, and that fact. But this looks like pretty good, right? It tells us in 1814 he was at least that age. It's also interesting that it shows his last name is Tyner, not Roberts. Okay, but I'll explain that. And it mentions his mother's name. You see that? Registered by desire of Millie Roberts. Okay. I don't know her birth name, that's part of this mystery, but we know there she must be married to somebody named Roberts. You're about to hear with that. Here's where librarians don't probably know this, and I'm about to play something that's fascinating. Most published reports about the Roberts family say Uriah did not immigrate to Liberia. 6 kids went with their mom. Joseph Jenkins Roberts was married. He had an infant child. Those went to Liberia, according to everything I've read. During my research for this presentation, I found documents with the help of the Matthews County Librarian that not only showed that Uriah emigrated to Liberia, the oldest child, but that he did so with his wife, Phoebe, and 3 children in 1824, 5 years before the rest of the Roberts family, including his famous brother, Joseph. And his name was Uriah Tyner, that he was the oldest child of Millie Roberts. Did you know that before? I don't think anybody in Liberia knows that. You would have to have gone through this process of picking up records. The 3 children were named William, James, and Antoinette. The same list shows Uriah's age is 29. Okay? In 1824, he couldn't be 29 if he was born in 1802. And that's one of the challenges you have when looking at 200-year-old documents. All historians shake their head. Right? There's transcription errors, there's spelling errors, there are date errors, but this is what we know. And that, I kind of rely on these primary sources, right? He registered, and this is the information his mom gave. And that's one of the challenges. Then what do we find? This marriage register right here in Petersburg that makes clear Uriah's marriage to Phoebe Kerman or Kennison or Kumon. It's a bit hard to read, but my arrow shows Uriah, Tyner, and here's Phoebe. I'm sorry, my bad. Here's Phoebe, Kennison or something, and there's Uriah Tyner. That's the marriage of the oldest brother of Joseph Jenkins Roberts. Liberians probably this one, we had never heard this before. Am I correct? We didn't know there was a brother, Uriah, who came to Liberia 5 years before. Again, it's hard to contest this. The passenger list for the ship Cyrus that they went to Liberia on shows the name Uriah Tyner, wife Phoebe, the 3 children. I mentioned that, right? I'm sorry, going back. So this is the marriage document, so it further reinforces it. His name was not Jenkins or Roberts. His name was Tyner. And I'm thinking, where are the Tyners? What happened to the Tyners in Liberia? I move on. Amelia's second child was Joseph, your first president. She would go on, the mother would go on to have 7 children. Various published sources say that the children's biological father may have been a planter of Welsh origin. That's what you see in all the books. All the famous books written about Liberia at the beginning talk about this. You think he was a Welsh planter. And then Amelia gave 6 of her children the name Jenkins. So Joseph Jenkins Roberts and John, and so on and so forth. But we don't know more about who Jenkins was. Who is the Jenkins? We don't know. We looked, and we're going to continue to look. One of Joseph's younger brothers, Henry, was given the name Wright. Where have you heard the name Wright before? Remember the previous slide? So, perhaps to honor the man who emancipated his mother. But he's the only son who got the second name Wright. But who was Jenkins? Research into who the biological father was is ongoing. And with all of your help and people you talk about, maybe we'll find the answer one day. Maybe the answer is in Liberia, maybe it's right here in Petersburg. Maybe it's in a document so we can really say, yes, I move on. In 1811, remember, Joseph was born in 1809, right? So he's now 2 years old. Mom is Amelia, we don't know his dad. Amelia married James Roberts. That name you know. A free black boatman in Wrightville County. Who's from Wrightville County here? Couple people. The marriage bond that you're looking at lists the couple as James Roberts and Millie Jenkins. Millie Jenkins. Where did that name come from? We just said we don't know who Jenkins was. The bond was signed by James Roberts, who is the gentleman getting married, and a certain James Tyner. Tyner? Is this the same Tyner who Uriah got his name from? And if so, what was Tyner's role other than witnessing the marriage bond? You all, I urge you to go through research after this. Let's find the answer, right? What was the Tyner involvement? In everything I've consulted, there is no reference to James Roberts as the biological father of any of Amelia's 7 children. Nothing I've read said James Roberts was their dad. Everything I've read says he was their stepfather. He is referred to as their stepfather, but several of the children were born after their marriage. So James and Amelia are born, and the kids still are named Jenkins. And but they get Roberts. They all end up with Roberts except Tyner, who goes to Liberia as the Tyner, not a Roberts. Have I thoroughly confused you? This is what research is about. Mary, Henry, William, and John, 4 of the youngest siblings of Joseph, right, were born after the marriage in 1811. They were born after Amelia and James moved their family to Petersburg in 1815. And yet they're still named Jenkins.
AI solved it.
In 1815, by the way, for those of you who know about the drama of Petersburg, was the year of the Great Petersburg Fire. That's the year Joseph Jenkins Roberts and his family moved here. So his mom, his stepfather, and his older brother, Uriah, presumably, moved to Petersburg. And here we come to Petersburg now. Let's take a closer look at this city. Starting in 1813, correct me if I'm wrong, historians, the city was paving its streets, which helped attract business. That helps, right? Paved streets, like electricity, can do more things. The historical map you see shows the Appomattox River on the southern edge of Pocahontas Ward. This is not what it looks like today. The river flowed like this on the southern edge of Pocahontas, right? In 1915, a new channel for the river was created on the northern edge of the ward, which you see today. This ends here. You can see this part of the river, but then it ends, and Pocahontas is now linked like a peninsula to the rest of the city. Sergey, any change to what I just said? But that's it. So this may have looked like an island, it actually had a marsh, right? But today it's a peninsula. It's connected to the city. Joseph Jenkins Roberts, so what we know is he lived in Petersburg from 1815 until 1829, so 14 years, when he and his family emigrated to Liberia. Records show that his stepfather, James Roberts, made a Petersburg deed of gift of a half-acre lot 27. We just found this out today. Rick and I were at the courthouse, And the Powhatan section, there's actually a Powhatan Street, otherwise known as Second Street, over in Pocahontas, to his wife. So he makes a gift to his wife in 1817. That was lot 27. And we had seen that. If you go there today in Pocahontas, you'll see a vacant lot. But that's where they had buildings, homes, multiple buildings, right? So he did live, her family did live in Pocahontas, which wasn't widely known. He may have lived elsewhere, but they had property there. Also, James Roberts purchased lot 59 in Petersburg on the beach, otherwise known as Sandy Beach.
Sandy Beach.
From the estate of a William Colvin for $1,000 in 1818, and mortgaged this to the estate on May 6, 1818. So a lot of this information is available. I think we can safely say that we live in Pocahontas, and for those of you who don't know, Pocahontas is what? It has the largest concentration of black families historically in Petersburg. So people assume that he would have lived there. But he may have just as easily have lived in other parts of the town, in the downtown area. So I don't make the mistake of assuming that all blacks lived in one area, right? He was a successful businessman, as were other African Americans at the time, and they may have lived in different parts of the town. So be careful about generalization, right? All right, let's move on. We should also say that the business, since he was involved in shipping, is that. You see where it says wharf, and then along this area? Probably, it's very likely that they had their shipping business either on this side, very likely, since they lived here. See Second or Powhatan? This is the home right there. You see it first? These two homes, there's two houses, right here. That's the Jarrett house. This is where Jenkins Roberts' lot was. Right there where my finger is, okay? On Second or Powhatan Street. You go there, and I think, when you see council people here, I think that's where the next historic plaque goes. Right? Does that make sense? You have a street named after him. You have a monument. That's an actual property, the family home. Wouldn't that be neat to develop? All right. What more do we know about Petersburg in the early 19th century? I'm going to speed things up because I know otherwise we're going to be here for several hours, which is maybe what we'd all like to do until the library takes us up. According to the U.S. Census from 1810, the city had a population of 5,668, making Petersburg the 26th largest city in the Union. By comparison, Richmond and Norfolk were the 12th and largest cities in the Union. Petersburg's population grew to 6,690 by the 1820 census, and by the time of 1830, a year after Roberts left, the population was 8,322, the 30th largest city in the Union. Petersburg, as those of you historians know, had one of the largest, most economically active, free black populations in America. We were at the heart of the universe, right? About 1 in 5 of all citizens were the free black enslaved population, plus the free men, far outnumbered the white population. And in fact, until 1860, Petersburg was a majority black American city. It was also the focus of a number of commercial enterprises, including lumber yards and smithies, think of iron works. It tapped the rich resources of the land below the James River, so further inland. Goods came out. Free black men worked as tobacco twisters, twisting tobacco. Some of you seem to know that. They worked in iron foundries and as draymen. Think of low carts, flat carts that were rolled through the streets. Cab drivers, think of horse-drawn carriages. Or in the skilled trades of mason, wheelwright, coopers, and blacksmiths. Free black women worked in tobacco factories as stemmers, or as washerwomen, seamstresses, or laborers. I think it's important to think of Petersburg as a gathering place, too, at this time, where people of color shared information through churches, workplaces, and family networks. Like we talked about that in Norfolk. What was heard at the Norfolk Wharves was discussed on Petersburg streets. I like that connection there, right? And in kitchens and in prayer meetings. This is a photograph, by the way, of the Union Street Church, Methodist Church, where Roberts made a public confession of faith in 1823. It stood on the east side of South Union Street between Halifax and Washington, where the old Roper building is. ground in 1903. Petersburg residents, you know where we're talking about, where this church would have stood?
Yes.
Approximately.
Yes, one block off.
Right nearby.
Yes.
There's a chapter about Union Street Methodist Church, and P.H. Drury's book, The Story of the Church, The History of Washington Street Church, published in 1923. In it, we learned that church membership in 1820 consisted of 111 white parishioners, 55 colored. By 1830, a year after the Roberts family emigrated to Liberia, church membership was 257 white and 160 colored. A well-integrated church, I would say, right? At the time. Some names of pastors from 1822 to 1826 who lived with Pastor Joseph Jenkins Roberts. Listen to these names. Hezekiah Gilbert Lee, L-E-I-G-H. George W. Hamilton, William Hammett, H-A-M-E-T-T. You know those names, right? They were pastors of this church when he went. At an early age, Joseph heard the Baptist Reverend Lot Carey. Remember Lot Carey? He went to Liberia in 1822, Sierra Leone from Liberia. And he would have come and given a guest sermon at this church, preaching about the freedom given to blacks in Africa. And apparently this sermon had a profound effect on young Joseph. Right? Carey became one of the leaders in the early days of the Liberian colony up until his death in 1890. Lot Carey, a prominent figure in the church of the colonization, came here and preached and influenced people. As I mentioned earlier, James Roberts, the stepfather, operated a flatboat that transported merchandise on the Appomattox and James River. Right, the Appomattox leads to the James River and they go to Norfolk. Flatboats, if you were not aware of this, I love this illustration that I found. That's what a flatboat is. That's what the Roberts enterprise operated. They carried tobacco, flour, cotton for export. Petersburg was a major tobacco hub. I think you all know that. We could think of the Appomattox River as the historic highway, I read in one book, for flatboats. The distance is between 90 and 110 river miles, depending on the exact route it meanders. And keep in mind that these flatboards were unpowered and in most cases did not have sails, like you see here. They were steered with poles or oars, almost entirely current driven. So as the river flowed, all you have to do is make sure you don't bump into something, right? And when they got to the Elizabeth River near Norfolk, they had to wait for favorable tides to move them toward the city. The travel time was often, I should say, flatboats usually travel 8 to 12 hours per day, and rarely at night. A typical trip would take 6 to 8 days from here to Norfolk on one of these boats. Longer to come back. They couldn't put on a truck and ride back. No, they had to come back river, the same boat, with going against the tides. James Roberts dies in 1823. Joseph was 14 years old. James leaves his wife and family 2 houses, several boats, and parcels of land. Where is his final resting place? We're going to find out. Somewhere he dies. We haven't found his name. The People's Cemetery or the Lanford Cemetery. If you go back to where I think he was from, which is Surrey County, we don't know. Research continues. What we can surmise is that the two oldest brothers, Uriah and Joseph, take over the boat business. Right? That one, 14, 20, their ages. Many other partners as well. There's no record of Joseph attending school. I know, although I did saw something recently about him attending middle school somewhere, but I haven't verified that. But he did have access to a private library of the barber, Reverend William Nelson Colson, who's also a minister, and one of Virginia's best educated black presidents. The library included books on biography. Think about this, this is a 14-year-old kid who is interning, right? He's an apprentice in a barbershop, but he also checks out the library of this man's house or business. Books on poetry, religion. Talk about an influence, even if he doesn't get a formal education in the sense of going to the classroom. He may have also received instruction in reading and writing from someone by the name of Joseph Shiphard, who organized free black schools in several cities. I don't know if that's a familiar name. And who emigrated to Liberia on the same boat as Joseph Shiphard. William Colson, the barber, was married to Sarah Herrick Ellebeck, also a member of a free black property owning community. So these were the families that start hearing more and more about as we get closer to one Liberia. What we know about Amelia during this period, the mother, is well captured in the book 10 African American Presidents by Faith and Martin Sternstein. Quote, Amelia was described by a white contemporary as a woman of intelligence, moral character, and industrious habits, well known for her good traits and piety. That's Joseph Jenkins Roberts' mom. Free Black Baptist and Methodist congregations thrived in Petersburg during this time, and most Protestant denominations had active black members, both free and enslaved. And Petersburg Baptists, at that time, organized an African American Missionary Society, and were connected with a similar society in Richmond's First Baptist Church, the Lot Ferry Girls. Attempts to settle free blacks in West Africa reached Petersburg swiftly and did the formation of the African Colonization Society. Petersburg's Colston Waring, a free black Baptist deacon with the Guilford Baptist Church. Anybody here from Guilford today? We invited them. I wish they were here. Another place where I could go get a lecture. Here's one of their deacons. Traveled to Liberia in 1823, returned to Virginia to report positive developments to free blacks in Richmond and Petersburg, and returned to Liberia in 1824 on the ship Cyrus with 100 immigrants from the region, along with his family, including his daughter, Jane Rose, who would later marry Joseph Roberts in Monrovia. But she's from here. She was from here. I think the family may have come from Norfolk, actually, but to be verified. But they were here. Another influential figure who counseled Robert's family, according to something I read, was a certain Gabriel Poyon de Sosue. I've seen that name, a white clergyman in the family's church and the treasurer of the Petersburg Auxiliary Society of the American Colonization Society. And don't forget, Joseph's brother Uriah, where was he in the 1820s? He had gone to Liberia. Maybe he was writing to his brother. I don't know. And because Uriah and his family were on the Cyrus as well. They were going back to 100. You can say this, the religious beliefs of the Roberts family influenced their decision to immigrate. They expected to spread Christianity now. You see that a lot in literature. Evidence also suggests that it was the lack of liberties and citizenship in Virginia and the American nation that led Roberts to persuade his family to immigrate. Blacks were prohibited from voting, from holding office, from pursuing an education, or serving in the militia or juries. What you're looking at is a section of Virginia law pertaining to free blacks and what we call mulattoes. Note the language requiring, I don't know if you can read that clearly, but required free blacks and mulattoes to hold registration certificates and the threat of jail if they did not have such certificates on their person. If you want to hang around a city or a country that requires that, we can think about that today, but that's what people face. The threat of jail. Acts or laws passed by the Virginia legislature in 1793 and 1803 required every free Negro, in quotes, or mulatto, in quotes, to be registered and numbered in a book to be kept by the county clerk. You can see these books today in the clerk's office. That's where we were. Registration included the free black person's name, sometimes age, a brief physical description, and the circumstances of the person's freedom or emancipation. We already saw a glimpse of one of those registrations. If an individual was born free, the record may reference their parents. If the person was emancipated, the record may include a former enslaver whose all voting rights, in case of the place and date of emancipation. You're looking at a copy. This was important for Liberians. For all of us here doing that. This is the registration of Joseph Jenkins Roberts, future president of Liberia, in Petersburg, January 1825, 4 years before he emigrated with his family. He was 15 years old. It reads, if you can't read that, I'm going to tell you what it says. A lad of color, 16 years old in March next, so he was 15. Rather above 5'6" high in shoes, so wearing shoes he was 5'6". Light complexion, grizzly or reddish brown hair, has a small scar right side of his breast, about an inch below the breastbone. Throat, born free, he's the son of Amelia Roberts, a free woman under whose charge he now is, whose desire he is registered. I don't think many Liberians have seen this document before. Here's a copy of the registration of Amelia Roberts from 1822. You will note that Amelia's registration contains the fact of her emancipation by William Wright. You see, fourth line down, the last two words, T of William Wright, recorded in the clerk's office of the Hustings Court of Petersburg. Well, she was a free woman of color, 5 foot 2.5 inches high, 40 years of age, bright complexion, scar on her forehead, several moles on her breast, emancipated by something, deed of William Wright. That's the mother of First President. Here's a copy of the registration of James Roberts, stepfather, from 1822. I'll just highlight for their more physical description. He's 46 years old. This is the stepfather of the president. Note, fourth line down on the right hand, by trade a waterman. Remember the boat? This is our, not the biological father, the stepfather. I move on. Here's a copy of the registration of William N. Colson, describing his trade as a barber. You see that? Right here, by trade a barber. Right here. Born free in the town of Petersburg. And then physical description was age 19. So he was similar and he was a little bit older than Joseph Jenkins Roberts. I can't overstate, by the way, Colson's importance to Joseph Jenkins Roberts, particularly in Petersburg, and then later in Liberia, as you will hear. This is a view of the now closed portion of the Appomattox. If you've been down to the river, you know that on the left is the south end, the south side of Pocahontas. And on the right is where Joseph Jenkins Roberts Street, there's a street named after Joseph Jenkins Roberts. It's right on the right, just to the right of that picture. Okay? And so we think this is probably where the Roberts shipping company was, either on the left or on the right, probably on the left of Pocahontas, but somewhere there. It seems pretty clear that he had this exposure to maritime thinking, and that had an influence on him. For a boy growing up in Pittsburgh, Norfolk was not remote. It was a week downriver, a place where ships arrived from beyond the horizons. The young boy went, wow, look at that, all those people coming from Europe and the Caribbean. And it helps explain why immigration in Liberia was conceptually imaginable. Why this young man decided, I'm going to go to West Africa and take that risk. He had already seen international trade, right? He and William Colson, Barber, established a trading company called Roberts and Colson and Company. Acquired a schooner called the Caroline and began to trade in the United States of Liberia. You've heard me mention the American Colonization Society, the ACS. It was founded in 1816 in Washington. It brought together individuals with very different views on race, on slavery, and the future of free black Americans. Some members believed that colonization offered a humanitarian solution. Others viewed it as a way to address social tensions within the United States. Some saw colonization as a way to oppose slavery. Others as a way to remove free blacks from American society. They were worried. Supporters included Thomas Jefferson, James Monroe, James Madison, Henry Clay, Daniel Webster, Andrew Jackson. Several presidents in there, right? Future presidents. The society organized and financed early voyages to West Africa, providing ships and supplies to establish administrative structures to govern the colony for several decades. It laid the groundwork for what was to become the Republic of Liberia. By the way, we're looking at a copy of the ACS membership certificate. Wanted to join? Put your name, pay dues, or whatever it was, contribution. This is one of the ACS copper 1 cent coins minted at the Belleville Mint in New Jersey, especially in the year 1833. The idea was to facilitate commerce in the colony. The coins featured a palm tree, a ship, and a man. You see that very clearly there, right? And the date. After Liberia became independent in 1847, the new government began issuing its own coins. Many black leaders at the time, including Frederick Douglass, whose image you see here, opposed colonization and asserted their rightful place in American society. You can see the cloud, right? The views on this. Opponents viewed it as a racist scheme to remove free black people, undermining their claims to American citizenship and rights. White abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison called the ACS a fraud believing it perpetuated slavery by removing potential abolitionist voices and fostering racial prejudice. This was intense. These were some pretty important debates. Other free blacks chose emigration, leave the United States, viewing Liberia as an opportunity for greater autonomy, land ownership, and civic participation. You could breathe, right? So there was no single black response to colonization. All African American people of color did not think one way about this. There was a divide. The debate was pretty strong. Figures such as Roberts emerged as leaders within the colonization framework, but ultimately guided Liberia toward independence in 1847. Independence marked a transition from externally guided administration by the ACS to self-government. In some, Liberia's early leaders transformed a colonial experiment into a sovereign nation. We're going to get into all of that in a second. So you can say, yeah, okay, the ACS initiated Liberia's beginnings. Liberians, like Joseph Jenkins Roberts, shaped its future. They took over from the ACS. People, by the way, often ask, how many African Americans emigrated to Liberia in the 19th century before the whole immigration thing stopped? Any guesses in the room? How many people ultimately left for Liberia? I've got the numbers.
1,000.
1,000. Anybody else? The answer, about 11,000 African Americans, both free, this is important, both free and formerly enslaved. So it wasn't all free blacks. There were some people who were let go to go to Liberia who were still enslaved, but as a condition of leaving, they were emancipated. Right? Major flows in the 1830s and 1850s, so that 11,000 figure is not the final figure. The Liberia fever in the 1870s saw another surge with thousands more arriving before numbers declined in the 1890s. Here's the big number. Roughly 16,300 American blacks settled in Liberia by the end of the 19th century. That's the number you want to have. Not millions, not hundreds of thousands, 60,000. But they weren't the only ones to arrive in Liberia then. Remember, there was already a large indigenous population, many different ethnic groups. There were about 6,000 recaptured Africans, people rescued from transatlantic slave ships that were intercepted by the U.S. Navy, leaving West African points, including Liberia. Slavery continued even involved. And 300 Afro-Caribbean Caribbeans. These were the people who populated Liberia, in addition to the very large indigenous population. Never forget the indigenous population, right? As history of Liberia shows later. The vast majority of immigrants were from where? Virginia, Georgia, North Carolina, and Maryland. Who sent the most immigrants altogether? Virginia. Good class. Liberia in 1830. Wow, very good. A year after Joseph Jenkins Roberts gets there. He was 20 years old. His brother Uriah and his family, as I said, had traveled to Liberia 5 years earlier. Uriah died, I think, in 1825, according to the record. So he only was alive a year after arriving. We don't know what happened to his wife, Phoebe, and the 3 children. Research. Joseph's mother, Amelia, reportedly spoke to the Union Street Methodist Church shortly before the family departed Petersburg. So we're reaching the end of the Petersburg portion here and say, we don't have any time to cover that. And you can keep moving, right? Her message was read by Liberia's ambassador to the United States, Francis Dennis, at the ceremony unveiling the memorial in 1978. Amelia would have said this at the church: I thank God for hearing my prayer. Pray for us, Francis. This is months before she left. I am carrying my sons where they can be truly free. We will not make you ashamed, she said to the congregation. Beautiful quote. The Roberts family traveled to Liberia on the ship carrier left Norfolk from Monrovia on February 9, 1829. There were 147 passengers in all. 101 of whom were free blacks from Richmond and Petersburg. Joseph's mother, Amelia, Joseph's spouse, Sarah Ann Miner, their infant child, and 5 of Joseph's siblings traveled to Liberia. Okay, now we're in Liberia. The Roberts family landed in Liberia on March 18, 1829. It means their voyage took 37 days. At the time, the colony had a population of about 600. Remember, that's the colony, not the indigenous population, which numbered hundreds of thousands. Joseph and Sarah had an infant child. That child died in the first year after arrival of what was known as African fever. Today we call that malaria or yellow fever. Accounts vary as to Sarah's death. Some say she also died within the first year after arrival, while other evidence points to her death in 1838, 9 years after she arrived. When the family left Norfolk, John Quincy Adams was president of the United States. By the time the family arrived 37 days later in Liberia, Adams had been succeeded by Andrew Jackson as president of the United States. Amelia, upon arriving, wrote a letter back to Petersburg saying they were pleased with the country and had, quote, not the least desire to return to Virginia, unquote. Oh, here's girls will say, oh, right? Tell me about Liberia. Like, that's an artist's memory of ships arriving, and this is what Monrovia looked like from an artist's perspective. Already the settlement had some churches, and that looks like a church there. Looks like a fort, and this is what we call the Mama Point, right? That would be Mama Point. Right? Moving on. In 1829, the colony was just emerging from the ravages of disease and hostile indigenous peoples. This is the literature that I'm reading, that had almost destroyed the small settlement. I have seen estimates that as much as 20% of immigrants died of disease. Right? That's what? 2 in 10? Many of those within weeks or months after arrival. Troubles continued. The colony became sufficiently stable to begin economic expansion. Roberts capitalized on the situation and adapted quickly to mercantile life. That's what he's been doing here. You see the roots back here, the business acumen. He became deeply involved in trade, shipping, and diplomacy. While the journey from Petersburg to Norfolk would have taken 1 week, the journey from Norfolk to Liberia by said ship would have taken 6 to 8 weeks to resolve. By the early 1830s, with the help of sympathetic white Americans, ACS, the Roberts and Colson Trading Company was transporting animal skins, ivory, camwood, which is a hardwood, home products, and other African goods to New York, Philadelphia, and other American ports. Roberts established a company store in Norfolk that was stocked with cider, clothing, and medical implements, wine, and such fancy goods as feather fans and silks. Colson, the barber, decided to emigrate to Liberia himself, but he wrote to the American Colonization Society in 1834, telling that besides doing business, which he was doing Roberts, he also wanted to spread the gospel. So he and 50 immigrants chartered a ship in late 1834 and sailed to Liberia. In 1835, the company, Roberts Colson, purchased a second schooner, the Margaret Mercer. Colson traveled to Liberia that year, 1835, and planned to stay to work as a missionary and acquaint himself with the African side of the business. The inventory of the war book that he took, listen to what Colson took. This is the inventory of his things. You can tell he was a successful professional man. The list included new linen and fine cotton shirts, several silk vests, silk handkerchiefs, 4 pairs of kids' gloves, 250 Spanish cigars. Guys, 250 Spanish cigars.
We have one of them.
And more than 25 religious books. Shortly after he arrived, he became sick with fever, Colson, and died. He had left his wife Sarah behind in Petersburg to supervise the purchase and supplies of the company. Joseph Jenkins wrote Mrs. Colson saying, quote, do not think that had he remained in America, he would not have died. God is the ruler of the universe and protects as well in the wilds of Africa as in the fields of America. I say, do not accuse providence in this. I say again, God does all things for the best. Quote. That's what Joseph wrote to the grieving widow. After Colson's death, Robert's trading ventures continued. He became more involved with politics. He gained the confidence of the ACS and protested against the slave trade that was still continuing. Unscrupulous Liberians who were perpetrating. In 1833, 2 years before Colson's death, Roberts was elected high sheriff of the colony. Policeman. His duties include, he had just about every job imaginable. His duties included responsibility for supervision of elections and for controlling nearby ethnic groups, indigenous people. what we know, Roberts had a reputation as carrying out his duties effectively, using diplomacy whenever possible and resorting to force only when necessary. What was the nature of the problems, by the way, at that time? Intra-settler disputes. Some was race, lighter skin versus darker complexion, from what I've read. Lighter skin, light skin, Joseph Jenkins Roberts. That's what the literature says. Okay? Earlier settlers against newer settlers. Sort of a favorite group of people and people who just wanted, what's our place in this colony? And he found ways to use his cleverness, if you will, and negotiated also with ethnic groups. He was constantly trying to calm things down, to stabilize the situation. He eventually rose to the rank of general of the militia. He wasn't even president yet. And because of his success, the American Colonization Society appointed him lieutenant governor in 1839. This is 10 years after he arrived. He also served as the director of public works and commercial operations of the Port of Monrovia, where he tried to get British traders to pay duties to the colonial government. The Colonization Society sought to provide more autonomy because they were running out of money, quite frankly. So it revised the Constitution for the colony. And the governor, who then acted as an agent of the ACS, became the chief executive of the colony. Who was the first governor of Liberia? Thomas Buchanan. Buchanan? Yeah, city of Buchanan. A Pennsylvania native and brother of James Buchanan, the 15th president of the United States. When Governor Buchanan died in 1842, who became the first black governor of Liberia? Over the next 5 years, he pushed for Liberia to become an independent country. So he just, business and politics. And he requested the U.S. Navy's help in putting an end to the slave trade. He had contacts with Admiral Perry. Come here and help us out. Shoot some guns and people will stop doing what they're doing. As governor and later as president, he led efforts to expand Liberia along the coast and beyond. That was a feature of his later administration. He made several noteworthy trips to the United States over the course of his time in Liberia. In 1844, General John Harbaugh, one of Virginia's prominent plantation owners and an ardent supporter of colonization, invited Roberts to visit him in Virginia. Quote, "There is no governor on earth I should entertain with more pleasure under my roof than the chief magistrate of Liberia." Unquote. Roberts also was introduced to President John Tyler at the White House. In 1846, Roberts urged the Liberian legislature to announce the independence of the country, but still cooperate with the ACS, which continued to give some support to the settlement. Roberts told those who questioned the wisdom of declaring independence, because not everybody thought it was a good idea. Quote, "They were deaf to the calls of liberty. Let them banish forever from their minds the hope of ever attaining a freedom, reputation, and happiness, which as humans they are entitled to." So if you don't believe in independence, you're going to pay the consequences. There was a referendum in October of 1846 that yielded a vote for independence. There were several thousand in the settler population. Indigenous people were not included in the vote. There were approximately 600 men who were eligible to vote. Women were not eligible to vote. You had to own property, you had to be male of a certain age, 21. Of the 600 men who were eligible, only 269 cast votes. And the result was 211 in favor of independence and 58 opposed. That was the election that determined independence for Liberia. 269 men. And more than that, stayed home, didn't bother. Have you ever heard that number before? But it's like, it's a small, I guess it's a representative sample, statisticians might say. That's how many people voted for independence. In 1847, Roberts goes to the ACS and says, "Grant us freedom." The organization agreed. Roberts contacts an American lawyer in Boston, Simon Regan, help us draft a constitution, modeling after the U.S. Constitution. Greenleaf worked on it, but the people in Liberia worked on it. We have to give credit where credit is due. Greenleaf would have come up with some ideas, but they tailored it to the Liberian, the face of Liberia at that time. The Constitution banned slavery, restricted land ownership to citizens, and restricted citizenship to persons of color who owned real estate. The majority of the indigenous population, which comprised 99% of the population, was not granted citizenship. Virginia native Hillary Teague, original, drafted the Declaration of Independence and went on to serve as Liberia's first Secretary of State. Teague also owned and edited Liberia's first newspaper, the Liberian Herald, wrote the hymn of independence, and penned poems. And I think those who say Teague was the father of Liberia's independence, I join with that. He was the father of it. He really put the words down. On July 26, 1847, what happened?
Independence was declared.
Independence. What happened? People of Liberia gathered together, sang songs of praises to God, and made speeches as Roberts declared Liberia a free, independent, sovereign nation. Liberia became the first country in Africa where the people voted for their own president and had a constitution. I should also note that Liberia's national anthem, by the way, All Hail Liberia Hail. You start singing the program. Guess who authored that? Who was the author of the national anthem? Roberts. Nope. Here's a name you need to retain, especially if you're from Maryland. Baltimore native Daniel Bashiel Warner, who went on to become the country's first president. All right. While Joseph governed in Liberia progressive independence, Joseph also took care of his family. His brother William became sheriff of Montserrat County. Brother William, younger brother. Joseph sent his brother Henry back to the United States to attend Berkshire Medical School in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And I contacted the people who hold the archives for that school, which no longer exists. And what does it show? Henry graduated in 1847, the year of independence. And where is Henry? Henry J. Roberts, Liberia, Africa. And there's his faculty advisors. Is that cool or what? We need to spread the word. When we got this, it's amazing.
Almost at 7:30.
So here's the man who graduated and went back and started a medical practice. Here's his thesis on hemorrhage. One of about 20 pages of his thesis, but he wrote, and you see his name there, Liberia, West Africa. Here's Brother John, bishop in the Methodist Church in Liberia. Ordained in the United States in 1841, elected the office of missionary bishop, ordained in St. Paul's Methodist Episcopal Church in New York in 1966. In terms of Liberia, quote, labored faithfully for the edification and enlargement of the church. Before and after Liberian flag, you look at the old flag on the left with the cross, right? That was before independence, after independence, the Lone Star, okay? The 11th stripe representing the 11 men who signed the Declaration of Independence. Red and white symbolized courage and moral excellence. I move on. By the way, the committee of women who sewed the flag included Suzanne Elizabeth Lewis, the daughter of Colston Waring of Petersburg, the sister of the First Lady Jane Roberts, and the wife of John Lewis, one of the signers of the Declaration. Here's Joseph Jenkins Roberts finding president, right? He was elected. An election was held in September of 27, 1847. He and Samuel Benedict were the two candidates. Benedict was born into slavery in Georgia. He presided over the Liberian Constitutional Convention. People voted overwhelmingly for Roberts because they knew his leadership style they trusted. Roberts, this is important, Roberts was the first of 10 Liberian presidents born in the United States. Who knew that? He was also one of 3 born in Virginia. The other 2 were James Briggs Payne, native of Richmond, and Anthony William Gardner, born in Southampton County, right here. Payne was on the ship Harriet with the Roberts family. There were also 3 Maryland-born presidents. I mentioned one, Daniel Bashiel Warner, and 2 from Kentucky, 1 from Ohio, and 1 from South Carolina. 2 of those 10 presidents from the United States were born into slavery and became presidents of Liberia. William Coleman and Alfred Russell of Kentucky. President Roberts, I mentioned diplomacy. He traveled to England, met with Queen Victoria. They worked out a trade deal between the 2 countries. He went to France, met with Napoleon.
Evening, everyone. The time is now 7:30 p.m. and the TV Petersburg Public Library closes promptly at 8 p.m. Please bring to a close your studies, research, projects, and meetings. The public computers will shut down by 7:40 p.m. and the public restrooms will be locked by 7:45 p.m. for security reasons. We thank you for your patronage of the Petersburg Public Library, and we bid you a safe journey home.
Okay, I'm going to start sprinting through the end. That's too bad. There's so much good stuff to cover. I hope you're seeing the value of all this. So he goes to Europe, starts to get recognition. Britain is the first to recognize Liberia. France follows, Germany, and a bunch of other countries. What about the United States? We had people in the U.S. Congress who didn't want anything to do with Liberia. They didn't want a black ambassador in Washington. And so there was resistance until after the Civil War. And then Abraham Lincoln stepped forward and said, we need to make this happen. So independence in 1847. By 1862, 15 years later, finally the United States recognizes Liberia. Formal diplomatic relations are established. We open a legation pre-embassy days, right? And the first African American to serve as an ambassador, period, anywhere in the world, was Edward Dudley from South Boston, right? Nearby. An hour away or so. Another Virginia. So, Robert serves as president 4 consecutive 2-year terms. And that was his first time. He later served again as president from 1872 to 76, two more 2-year terms. Here is a gift from Queen Victoria. I'm going to race through these things. She would have given this dinner set to Roberts. It is currently on display at the Liberia National Museum. I think from here on out, look at some of the things. If you read those words, these are the things that he was responsible for. Securing the nation, relations with the indigenous people, trying to calm things down. Not all indigenous people favored what was going on in the settlement. They wanted their rights too, to be represented. Speaking of models of achievement and whatnot, that's executive mansion, or the artist rendering. Does it look a little bit like some homes in Petersburg, Southern Virginia? Okay, you're going to see a modern, today's executive mansion. So to face challenges, there are military challenges. Commercial challenges. Meanwhile, you can quickly read that, but he was also wanting to spread the good word. He was fundamentally an evangelist. And you can see that that influence continued. Even in his inaugural address, he was talking about Christianity. You might not agree with some of the language he did. You might consider some of those comments not so appropriate, politically correct. That was his thinking at the time. All right? And of course, Liberia became a model of the Christian nation in Africa, which was helpful in terms of its relations with Europe. Let's talk about the First Lady. That's your First Lady. And where was she from? She grew up here. Right? She went to Liberia as a 4-year-old. That's a picture when she was younger and a picture in her years after Roberts died. There's much I could talk about. She was sent to grace the executive mansion with ease and dignity. She spoke English and French fluently, and in all respects was well-bred and refined. She accompanied her husband on many of his visits and was the recipient of great attention. She met Queen Victoria twice, once with him, and once many years later, along with the big named Martha Briggs, who made a famous quilt of the coffee tree. Not this, not that, but these types of quilts are very famous in Liberia. She even taken a gift of a quilt that she made and presented to Queen Victoria, which then became part of the Windsor Castle art collection. And Jane Roberts was very much a part of that. She traveled to the United States. She raised money for a hospital that was never built. She got $50 from the president to go over to Cleveland. She met the first black woman to meet in the White House. And President Grover Cleveland gushed favorably about the good project that hospital was. By the way, the hospital in Liberia today in Monrovia is named after John F. Kennedy. Nothing to do with Joseph Jenkins Roberts, but John F. Kennedy, who would have met with President Tubman in the White House, and there would have been discussions about creating a hospital. I move on. Jane Roberts, by the way, there's a whole story about where she's buried. You know where she's buried? London. She lived with the first black mayor of the borough Battersea right down the street here. Maybe we can talk about that later. Okay? But, that's where she lived out of day. She left Liberia. She met John Archer and his wife, John Archer, a black man of Battersea. She lived with them and died in 1914 and is buried. You'll see her grave in a moment. This is a view of the Waring House. This is where the Warings lived. Those of you who know, Sergey, do you want to quickly talk about this?
Those who know Trapezing House, this was right next door to Trapezing House. And when they sold the house, they sold it to Mr. O'Hara, who built Trapezing House. That was the next door neighbor. So that was right down the street here.
That's where Jane Rose
Down the
grew up.
street on Market Street.
We move
So that
on.
bridge is still there, Baltimore.
This is, was it one of the presidents, I have to zip through this, but this is one of the presidents. He was from Richmond, born in 1819. Anthony William Gardner from Southampton County. So there's your three presidents from Virginia. Right? And they all have various roles. I can go into it, but we don't have time for that, unfortunately. Later, after his first term in the presidency, he was president. In fact, he served concurrently as president of Liberia College, later became University of Liberia, and president of the college. And he found ways to bring books and money to that college, and that's an artist rendering of what the college looks like. There are older statesmen. In his second final terms, he continued his diplomatic work, continued to try to enlarge the country, put out fires that were happening within the country, really a bridge between founding leadership and a new political era, which was emerging in Liberia. He was a Republican Party member. The New Whig Party was becoming a more powerful party, and the New Whig Party would go on to rule Liberia until 1980. All right, we're reaching the formal end of the presentation. I'm going to run through a bunch of slides, and maybe we can do questions for time. This is where Joseph Tankin Broadwood is buried. That's when it's nice and clean, and the Scholarship Foundation organizes, wreath laying ceremony, goes up to the monument we saw earlier. This is what it looks like in reality. And one of these walls has recently collapsed. I don't want to say too much, but there's a project that would restore that entire Palm Grove Cemetery in downtown. Look at this, my mother, Amelia Roberts. She's buried in that same enclosure. This was taken a few weeks ago by a colleague at the embassy, Sarah Ham, his wife. In the memory of my wife and children fallen in their sweetness. This grave is right here. This wall and everything is falling apart. This is the first president of Liberia. And it's a real challenge, I'm going to leave it to you all to work on that. And those of us who feel the importance of preserving history, we've got not just his grave, all of Palm Grove Cemetery, all the Liberians, all the American diplomats who are buried there, others. And I'm in contact with the DG of Tourism, by the way, about this. I'd like to be part of the discussion, but I know it's a terrible, terrible sight. When you look at it, Liberians are the first to say, why are we throwing trash on top of the cemetery? Right? You can't hide it. And Liberians are ashamed of it. The media is hard stuff. We've got to do something. Government officials, we've got to do something. I think this year, under President Boakai, something's going to be done. But it may not be everybody else. Final resting place. There's Hillary Tigg in the same enclosure, the father of independence. I would love to read that. Don't have time to do that. Here's the first lady's grave in London. So there's a whole story about a woman named Jean Rathbone, who is being after she got this picture. This is the grave right here, not this. Mrs. Roberts, First Lady, is here. The lady mentioned, Jean Rathbone, feels very strongly that Jane Roberts needs to be honored properly. So she's had this made on her own. She didn't even tell cemetery authorities. I think the challenge for the Liberian government is to maybe speak with authorities there, maybe your ambassador in London, getting it. But your first lady, that's her grave, and most people don't know this. And I spoke with the cemetery authorities. They said, nothing we can do. The grave belongs to the wife, Mrs. Archer, where she lived, and she has no known descendants. So they can't transfer the rights to that plot until we can sort out who is the rightful next owner. Maybe the Liberian government. another question that we put out there. And so we talked about the legacy. This is Pocahontas. This is the old flow of the river. This is the river, the street that leads into Pocahontas. This is the scholarship foundation we talked about. They have a brochure, and I would urge you to pick up a brochure. They're looking for partners in the United States, by the way. This is the importance of it, the educational foundation is they know that Joseph Jenkins Roberts left a certain amount of money in his will and wanted to start a school, which they've done. This is a new computer program. This is recent, partnering with an organization, but they're looking for institutions or individuals who contribute to their effort here in the United States. If you have ideas, please pick up a brochure. I'll let you make the contacts. So that's it. Now, I have a bunch of slides, and I skipped over some stuff, and I keep going out 20 minutes. So, you let me think of questions. Look up for any questions, and I'm going to run through slides real quick. You get a real quick flavor of stuff here. Ready? Let's do 2-3 minutes. It took me time to put this together. Drive on. Here we go. And formulate some questions. Look at that. That's the artist rendering of where Joseph Jenkins Roberts lives. This is what it looks like today. It has the National Library, it has the Children's Library, and the National Bar Association is upstairs. And look similar, right, with those arches? That's on Ashland Street, if I hear it. All right? And this is a view from inside the Executive Mansion porch, looking out at Centennial Hall across the street. And that building on the right is Providence Baptist Church. This is the side of the building of the Executive Mansion. This is the inside. National Library is just a room, not even as big as this room, the National Library. Gotta work on that. This is upstairs, and the books donated by Notre Dame University. The University of the Midwest gave a bunch of law books several years back for the Bar Association. This gentleman is participated in the opening of the American Shelf. Just as I left, I actually organized this with them. And we gave a bunch of Americana books that we taught young Liberian students to find useful reference books, how to get to college in that state. But that's the size of the room. It's a small room with an American voted shelf. Okay? And we can hold programs there. Again, we can work with the library to hold programs that talk about American independence. This is Centennial Hall, same monument. This is Joseph Jenkins Roberts talking to President Tubman, who is the longest serving president in modern times. Okay? Sorry, I have to run through this, but you can see the seal over there, the ship. You see it up here. Again, official seal of the country. Inside Centennial Hall, you have portraits of all the presidents. The first one you see when you enter is Joseph Jenkins Roberts. Presidential inaugurations are held every 6 years. Presidential terms last 6 years in Liberia. This is upstairs, same building. These are the signers of the Independence, Declaration of Independence. And you see the names from here. Hillary T. Right? John Day. I think Family of Furniture, right? Anthony Gardner. And here's all the names. Look at this. These are the men who were president since 1847. Look at the ones from here, in this area. 1, 2, Joseph Jenkins Roberts the second time. Haynes 2 times. Gardner. And all these Americans born. Cheeseman family came from here, but he was born in Liberia, so we can't say he's American born. And over there, those who signed the Declaration of Independence. Again, names from here. Hillary T. Right? John Day, Gardner. And then, of course, Joseph Roberts from Norfolk and Petersburg, Nathaniel Brander from Petersburg, first vice president. Petersburg, all over the place.
Brander lived just a couple blocks away from here.
Isn't that something? Yeah. These were the pioneers in 1822. Again, we've seen some of the names. There's Mark Perry, just point out one of many. That is right here on the monument. That's Tubman, President Tubman's grave. Right downtown Monrovia. Who feels like going for a tourist trip to Liberia? This is the monument we saw at the beginning. Italian artists would have created this, along with a bas-relief
showing the different evolution chapters of Liberia's history. These are students who benefit from a scholarship from the J.J. Roberts Educational Foundation. Again, brochures in the back. I hate to rush things. That's the first part of the biography. It shows the first American settlers arriving with their packages, kissing the soil. Thank God, right? Hands raised. And then later, maybe Joseph Jenkins Roberts or someone with a nice American suit at the time, meeting indigenous leaders. And look at that handshake. We should teach them the handshake, right? Snap, it looks like that's what they're doing.
Yeah, I like that joint.
I'll have to teach everybody a good Liberian handshake. Okay, we're almost there. First United Methodist Church is the first church in Liberia with ties to Richmond, congregation of Richmond, Liberia. That's the church established in 1822. That's the pastor, current pastor. That's what the church looks like on the inside. Reverend Reeves, yeah. Signing of the Declaration is inside the church. Again, familiar names now. The first pastor, Love Carey, Colin T. John Davis, right, from Southern Virginia. Colston Warren, he was also a pastor there. And that is a likeness of Love Carey, also in the church. Down the street from the church is this monument erected by his deeply afflicted widow in honor of Joseph Jenkins Roberts. A lot of people don't see this as important as the big statue, the big monument, but it's important. Born in Norfolk, arrived in Liberia, part of his life on this day, right, 150 years ago, his noble deeds follow him. And a bullet hole, I think, here. Right? Time?
Here's about 13 minutes.
Okay, so I'm done except to say Joseph Jenkins Roberts is everywhere. He's on coins, he's on bills, $10 coin from Liberia. He's on stamps. He's on Liberia Immigration Service, Roberts International Airport, ROB, Roberts, boarding pass, Roberts International Airport. Before last time, that's Roberts Port. It's named after him. The city of Northern Liberia, beautiful place. Very known for surfing. Surfers go there from around the world. And I would be remiss if I didn't finish with this slide. This is my last slide, forgive me. This is Theodosia Potter, fourth great granddaughter of Joseph Jenkins Roberts. And I met her at the embassy, and I let her talk for about 2 hours about as much oral history as I could. And my last promise to her, I'm fulfilling tonight by continuing to research about Joseph Jenkins Roberts and presenting that information to audiences in America. Thank you.
Thank you. There we go. F, like F in front, M-A-Y. These views are live at gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you. Next. Thank you.
Understanding of great things that came from future young folks have no clue, no idea, and a lot carry about the National Baptist Association. The Baptist Church also supported Lot Carey, and at the same time, as we marched to where we are now, and that has the window, there's been a lot of support.
I love what you just said.